Alright, so now it's time to start adding our inking layer. So I'm going to turn off our first sketch layer. We're going to lower the opacity of the one we just did till we could barely see it. We're going to make a new layer. This one's going to be set to normal. We're going to make sure our ink is all the way black, and I'm going to get a nice good inking pen. And let's see, let's try the brush pen. I'm going to reset it because it looks like I've modified this one, but we just want it to be normal. So let's go ahead and reset it if I can remember how to do that, which I know there's a way. Alright, so the brush we're going to use is this gel pen brush. It's a standard brush that comes with Procreate. I think it's really great for inking, and we have our color set to black. So something you want to keep in mind when you're inking is that a lot of your shadows are just going to be completely black because of the style of inking, and you're going to be filling that in pretty much all the way with your inking tool. Okay. So start by drawing these in. Excellent. So for example, all under here, I'm going to be pushing that way back into shadow. Right, you can have a lot of shadow that's implied with the thickness of your line weight. Okay, we're gonna do the ear hole over here that I'm gonna do really quick. Then this part of his sort of like a nasal cavity here. And it might be better to like draw out the shapes you want to fill in and then fill them in afterwards, especially if you're using this little tiny brush like I'm using. It could be kind of hard to really get those details very well. You can use a bit of hashing as well if you want a little bit softer of a transition from your shadow. Go ahead and use some hashing marks. And we'll still be adding some shadow and stuff when we go back and do color layer and all that, but you can do your own as well. It's a pretty common technique used in comic books and tends to work well. It looks nice. Okay, adding just a few scales there. Excellent. Let's go ahead and move on up to, let's do this part right here first so that we can figure out where the rest of it needs to go. I'll do the other side. A little too big there. Perfect. Now something also that you will probably do is when you're doing the shadow, what you can do is add the core shadow and then leave a little bit of a reflection along the bottom edge. And that's going to be where we put our reflected light. So when you're shading, you don't want to shade all the way to the bottom a lot of times. You want to leave a little bit of a line there. All right, so it's coming along nicely. Let's go ahead and finish bringing this little strip of fabric that comes up over his head. And you know, I think we want to have it follow a little bit better the shape of his head. There we go. it's too much still. Just don't want it to look so flat. Just try starting up here. You want to try and keep your strokes as clean as you can. You can make sure that it's nice and clear. You don't want everything to be all messy and messed up. So let's do his nostrils really quick. And I'm going to have this thing come down attached to those actually. And that'll be how it's staying on his head, sort of. Okay. I'm gonna come down here. Just working in some of these shadows here. I'm actually going to throw this whole entire side here into shadow. So I'm going to switch to just a hard airbrush here to fill in the shape. Oops. Maybe not that big. I'm going to have this whole side back here in shadow. And this horn as well. And then I'm going to also have this half of his face over here be in shadow. Working down the back of his neck here. And do his jaw down here. Some bigger scales down here on his jaw, so they have that little lip. Kind of shows they have a shadow there on the bottom. Increase the size of this shadow here. Some more dark spaces in there that we can work with. This will all be in shadow here, but we are going to leave a little bit of that edge. We'll fill this all in with shadow. Switch to my airbrush and fill these in. This is going to be that reflected light that I was talking about. Switch back to our inking brush. Alright, we'll come back to the neck in a second. I'm going to finish up some more of the stuff up here on his head. Let's redo that. I think this one we're going to be the layer where the scales sort of start to fade. Switch over to our airbrush, come back and start working in here on the neck again. You really want to make sure you're utilizing clean, crisp lines and points. You don't really want any sort of round or bulbous sort of points or tips to your shapes. That'll kind of undermine the whole feel of it. So be sure not to do that. All right, let's switch back to our inking brush. We can come in here. And add some of these lines in here. Go ahead and add some shadows in here on the bottom of a couple of these scales. Just adding a few small detail lines here and there in some places to add a little bit more texture. Let's finish up these scales on his back, adding a little bit more of these texture lines there. And then we can move on to, we'll do a few feather parts on his head. And then we'll be ready to move on to our color flatting stage. Oh, and you know what? We still have to do these jewelry things that we have up to this point neglected so far. But we're going to come back and do those in just a second. So this whole part here is going to be in shadow. There's some deep shadow edges on the bottom of these here, and on a few of these scales as well. Do the same for these big ones. Alright, perfect. This looks really awesome so far. Now we just need to do these small details. We're not going to do the nose piercing. Instead, we're just going to do this kind of a headdress thing that they've got on here. And all these ones in the back are going to be completely in shadow. And let's make sure that's facing straight down. Okay. Is that straight down? Not quite. There we go. All right, and then we need another one that goes back here. Okay. Then the other one is going to come down right through here. And then we'll need to come through with an eraser. Actually, let's do this. It'll be easier if we do this. Let's do it on a new layer, and then we can go ahead and merge those layers. So I'm on a new layer, set to normal, nothing fancy. We're just going to draw the line we want on here. And that's too thick. Let's try it again. So draw the line on here. And then on the layer beneath it is where we can go ahead and erase things. And we won't have to worry about trying to erase out of that little hole. So then we can just merge those down. Perfect. Okay, and then let's do the other one over here. Once again, we're gonna make a new layer. This time I'm gonna lower the opacity so I can kind of see what I'm doing better. And the other one is going to come right through here. And we need it to come, trying to see where we drew it. Looks like about right here is where we'll want it. All right, and we can merge those together. And then the last thing we need to do is, well, really quick, there's just a few more spots I want to get a little bit more detailed down here. We kind of went fast because it's not quite the focal point, but we still want to make sure that everything looks nice and clean. I'm just going to finish up this part down here in the bottom. Okay. That looks better. Awesome. And then we can do some flowers or feathers, I mean. And then a few feather lines here. Just enough to let us know what these are. A lot of times less is more. I'm not going over every single strand on these feathers here. All right, there we go. I think that looks pretty awesome. And I think we're at a point where we can call this inking done. So that's it for this lecture. I'll see you guys in the next one.